Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here in June. I'm very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. And welcome to my latest Doctor Who video where I want to talk about the latest short story they're doing during lockdown. This time it's by Paul Cornell. Now, Paul Cornell is Doctor Who royalty, really. He's written a lot of pieces of fan fiction. He did the one in season 3 when the Doctor becomes human. I can't recall the title right now. One of the greatest stories ever told. It's one of the greatest Doctor Who stories ever told. No question about that. But unfortunately, Paul is an extreme leftist and he's a social justice warrior. Now, I'm going to read this short story he's done. It's called The Shadow Passes. I've only read kind of little bits and pieces of it. I wasn't ultrally impressed, and to be honest with you, it's like watching an episode of Chibnall's Doctor Who. It's very bland, and from what I can see, very, very boring. And there's an excerpt in there that really does trigger me, which we're going to talk about afterwards. So let's do this. Are we ready? Popcorn in microwaves. Eat. Let's do this. The Shadow Passes. The Doctor had brought them to Calapia. Right, it looks like Calapia is an anagorism, whatever the word is, for Capaldi. That's what I think. Anyway, the Doctor had brought them to Calapia for its rural charm, beautiful weather and magnificent ruins. Is that actually a real place? Maybe it is. The Calapians, she told Yaz, were a wonderful bunch. Throw a party at a drop of a hat. 6 heads, lots of hats. She also said they didn't like to talk about the ruins. And a bit later she added that she'd never figured out why. 2 facts which Yaz had placed in the drawer. 2 facts which Yaz had placed in the drawer in her head, marked, well, I hope that doesn't bite us in the bottom. Calapia had turned out to be as advertised, rural, charming, beautiful and magnificent. But the Calapians had been nowhere to be found. As Yaz and her friends had explored the building in one of the planet's major cities. Right, it's a planet, so basically it's fiction. Buildings which looked like they'd have had people in them yesterday, people who'd left them, carefully locked their doors behind them. Yaz had thought to herself that the mental drawer of hers got opened a lot. But there wasn't actually a lot left in there because most of the things that she'd suspected would bite her and her friends in the bottom actually had. She's been thinking that when Graham had found the sign, it had said the letters wobbling a little in the way. That indicated the TARDIS was translating for them this way to the shelters. And Am I overreacting, Graham had said, or is that just a tiny bit worrying? Which was how they'd ended up in a bare room, 100 feet underground, sitting in a circle with the names of famous people stuck to their foreheads. Calapian, who'd opened the door of the shelter when they'd knocked on it, had been shocked to find there were still tourists who didn't know about the death moon that passed over the planet every 64 years. They had quickly ushered the Doctor and friends inside and had assigned them a room. They'd asked if they had any hats and had seemed pleasantly surprised when they hadn't. Hat storage alone, they'd said, was taking up a whole corridor down here. How long is it going to be? I mean, this is a moon that'll come and go in a night, yeah? Ryan had asked. The Calapian had looked awkward on all 6 of its faces. Then it had told them that they would be down here for 3 or all of their Earth weeks. There were only minutes before the passage would begin. They had no hope of getting back to the TARDIS. Brilliant, the Doctor had said, a word which had been completely at odds with the sort of words Yaz had been about to utter. It hadn't matched the looks on the faces of Graham and Ryan either. 3 weeks of indoor games results. Let's say that properly. 3 weeks of indoor games result. It had become clear most immediately that the doctor, though she liked the idea of indoor games, didn't actually know the rules of many. She had in her pocket a chess set, and she could play that, except she instead insisted on making individual noises for each piece when she moved. She'd also had a travel set of a game she insisted was really called Scariball, despite it said on the box, because that was how they pronounced it on a planet the name of which she couldn't herself pronounce. They tried to play that first, but the doctor kept putting down the letter tiles, which formed the names of the places and the beings she'd known, or just to make a pattern on the board. Then she'd rearrange other people's tiles to suit that pattern. And after half a day of that, Graham had declared he was going on a strike. He went to find facilities and came back reporting that, to everyone's relief, things in that department were much like they were at home. Yeah, just what we want, Paul. A planet that's just like the planet Earth. Great escapism, mate. So the doctor had asked them what they'd like to play. Ryan had played the game with the names stuck on foreheads at parties when he was younger. And if there was one thing the doctor had in her pockets, it was pens, as well as a handy gadget that could manufacture something like paper, except it decays into compost after a day. Or if it doesn't, it becomes, highly explosive. Which was how they'd come to be all sitting in that circle. From where she was, Yaz could see that the doctor had a note reading Lewis Capaldi stuck to her forehead. Graham had Mel and Sue, and Ryan had Theodoric the Great. She, of course, had no idea what was stuck to her own forehead, though whatever it was clearly delighted Ryan and Graham, who'd come up with it between them. All right, said Ryan. So am I alive? The doctor looked alarmed. Do you think you might not be? Is this person alive? Ryan pointed to his piece of paper. Wait, when is this? Said Graham. I mean, when is now? Because we'll have to put down a rule to mean. Is this person, continued Ryan, alive in 2020? That's a terrible impersonation, said the doctor. What? Of him on the piece of paper. You sound nothing like him. Ah, said Graham, nudging Ryan. It's a him. Ryan pointed again at the piece of paper and paced his next sentence like there was a social medical hand clap between every word. I don't know who I am. Bit soon for that, said the doctor. We've only been here on one day. It ended up being one of the longest party games Yaz had ever taken part in, or maybe it just felt that way. Following Ryan's painful discovery of the history of the late Roman Empire and a bit of confusion about what the word goth meant. In that context, Graham's correct guess about how he could be two people at once, and at the doctor's anecdotes about playing the triangle for the lovely Scottish lad and his dad, Yaz decided to make a serious attempt to deduce whose name she was wearing. And, am I a woman, she said. Yes, said Ryan, and Graham quickly and immediately, Yaz glanced over to see the doctor open and close her mouth, as if deciding not to say something. Yaz wasn't sure she'd ever seen the doctor make that decision before. Okay, am I famous? Yeah, pretty much, said Ryan and Graham, but again, the doctor looked as if she'd had a problem with that, but didn't quite want to voice it. That thought Yaz was unique. Unique was where answers lived. One of her criminology lecturers has said that. Who wasn't the doctor sure about, to the point where she wasn't even willing to commit to them being a particular gender? Yeah, getting it? Oh, she pointed at the doctor. I am you, she said. Ryan and Graham shouted in defeat, and the doctor smiled. An enormous smile, like sunshine through clouds. I'm surprised it wasn't a rainbow. Shortly after, the doctor fixed all their phones so they could follow stuff from home, added lots of games to them too, though a lot of them didn't make much sense. The prospect of being shut up in here with her slowly changed from, as Ryan had put it in a whisper, like being stuck in a lift with a bee, to something a lot more relaxing. Yaz watched fascinated as she changed how she acted almost every hour, just happening to start telling a relaxing, funny story. As the night arrived of turning out her pockets to find miniaturized books, every now and then she would take herself off to a brisk walk around the room with one of the other of them when they needed to vent or just needed exercise. At one point, a small automated device arrived carrying a basic meal of local fruit, what turned out to be a sort of bread. The doctor used a sonic screwdriver to confirm they could eat it. Yaz noticed her sizing them all up as they did so, while they talked about what they'd do when they got home. A frown on her face, as if just for a second they'd disappointed her. A little later, that same day, Yaz joined the doctor on one of her walks. She wanted to share what she'd observed. "I thought you said you were socially awkward," she said. "Because I'm not seeing that right now." The doctor looked worried. "I am often seriously, but this is a task. I'm good at tasks. Thanks for noticing. Don't tell the others. I don't want them to start seeing me doing it, or they'll get tired too." "You made yourself annoying so we'd feel relieved when you stopped." "Oh yeah, did that without thinking about it. Relieved that something better than you thought it would be will get you through a day or so of orphanage. I learned that at Woodstock." "Do you do that a lot?" Right, I'm going to stop there for a minute. So the doctor isn't awkward. She's just pretending to be awkward. Is she pretending to be the doctor because the doctor's always been socially awkward? Some doctors have been more socially confident than others. It's like they're so desperate, not only to force this doctor that we haven't particularly warmed to down our throats, but to change the total concept of the character. They've cast a woman, fair enough, make her great, flesh her out. Oh no, you've got to do this. What got to 1970s hippie rock festivals? No, never again. The mud, the poetry, the nudity. Oh, was that summit? I mean, make yourself look smaller than you are. The doctor's face gurned, as it only did when her brain was wrestling with something she didn't particularly enjoy considering. Suppose I used to like it when people underestimated me, but in this body, it's a bit rubbish because when I go aha and I want people to stop underestimating me, they just keep right on underestimating me. Wow, I want to talk about this. This is what I want to talk about. Yaz felt that. We don't do that though, none of us. I sometimes think if we could see all you were at once, it would be too much. We couldn't deal. You see, we're going to continue reading it, you see? And this is what I'm talking about, Paul Cornell. So he writes in this excerpt that the doctor has always felt underestimated, but ultimately she can prove who she is and her worth. And because she's been a man, people accept it and no longer underestimate him, right? But now that she's a her, they underestimate her. She says, aha, and they still underestimate her. Why? What is Paul trying to say? Not in so many words. Because she's a woman. Because she's a woman. Yes, Paul wants us to know that all women are underestimated. As I said to you, Paul Cornell is a really, really good storyteller, but he's also a social justice warrior. And I'm going to talk about breaking up this club, this Doctor Who club up once and for all, because it's becoming seriously sickening to me. And I knew that Cornell's story wouldn't be much cop. Basically, it's an analogy for lockdown. It's boring. It's literally boring. There's nothing really going on, unless there's something going on that I've missed. The doctor looked bashful and pleased, all at the same time, which was another of Yaz's favourite looks of hers. Well, I certainly can't. I'm a bit too much for me. I'm more than I knew about. Still, processing all that. I sometimes think that's why I changed personality instead of just making my body younger. I need to switch myself off and on again so I can handle all the memories. So a lot of it feels like it happened to someone else. I get a different perspective on what I've done. I've been thinking a lot about that lately. There's this girl in a mirror where I put her. That doesn't suit who I am now. When we get out of here, oh, this is getting deep and meaningful, isn't it? Yaz was about to say that was fine, but the doctor swung to include the others, suddenly pulling another surprise from her pockets. Balloon animals! You see, what we get in this context here is trying to explain the characterization of the doctor, the regeneration, and trying to explain to us in layman's terms why she changes her personality, right? Now, I think these things this is when you don't realise your audience is intelligent. We know the Doctor changes what he or she looks like, right? We know the personality changes, and that's part of the regeneration process. It's part of the new body. It's part of the synapses that happens to the brain. This has been explained before, but oh no, it's it's psychology. Now, I don't mind deep psychological commentary for the Doctor, but when you explain this is the problem with this Doctor and the way they write her. It's like Paul Cornell's been on Skype with Chris Chibnall, and he's taking exactly the same rules of law as he does. It's very insulting and it's very boring, but this is what SJWs do. They just care about representation. You've noticed that Yaz is the main companion he's writing about in this story as well. I don't need to say any more, do I? Graham raised his hand, which was half a request and half an order for the Doctor to halt. I've been thinking, he said, about where that meal came from. I think we should go find some Calapians and say thanks. Yes, said Ryan. See if we can help out. And there on the Doctor's face, Yaz saw that enormous smile again. And so the day passed in balloon animals, yoga and karaoke, also in learning all sorts of things about what Calapians like to do. As the Doctor and her friends cooked and distributed alongside them, on the last night of the passing of the death of the moon, everyone in the shelter came together and ate and were quiet. All those heads lowered in a remembrance of what had gone and those who'd been lost. The heads of the Doctor and her friends were lowered with them. Yaz felt by the end of it that she'd had a rest. Honestly, physically and spiritually, something had been proven to her in isolation. The Doctor saw that look on her face as they waited for the big doors to open. In the midst of death, she said so gently that only Yaz could hear it. We are in life. In the midst of death, she said so gently that only Yaz could hear it. Only Yaz could hear it. We are in life together. The doors opened and they stepped out into the daylight. Graham and Ryan grabbed each other and laughed. Yaz took a deep breath and the air was good. Look, I don't want to put down a guy who's contributed so much to Doctor Who. Paul Cornell is a really, really good writer. He's taken time out of his spare time. I know we're in lockdown and there's not much to do, but he's made the effort. So I don't really want to disrespect Paul, and I've already called him a social justice warrior, but he is. That's what he is. He's an extreme leftist, and the commentary here is so blatant. This is a nothing story. This is a silly, preachy, oh, look what you can do. Look, isolation isn't so bad, right? Yeah, it's so kind of, again, boring. It's childish, but not in a good way for children. You know the other stories we've heard. You know the Stephen Moffat ones we've had, right? They're so intelligent. They can be scary. They can be fun. There's something going on. But this guy wants to promote his alt-left messages, and that's the problem here. And this is exactly the problem I have with it. And this so focuses on Yaz more than the other companions. In fact, he barely touches the other two companions, right? He goes for Yaz. So what we're seeing is they're trying to, not only are they trying to force an unpalatable Doctor down our throats, one that we haven't warmed to because of the way she's been written and undeveloped and unfleshed out. And instead of developing her and fleshing her out in this short story, which wouldn't mean anything, but at least someone had tried, right? And Stephen Moffat has already tried and made it a little bit more palatable. Not by much, but at least. But this guy comes in, tells us a preachy story, basically tries to tell us how great Yaz is, and then we have that line from the Doctor about being underestimated because she's a woman, but not saying she's underestimated because she's a woman, right? And then preachily trying to explain to us in layman's terms why the Doctor changes personality every time the Doctor has a regeneration. Not only is it insulting the intellect of the audience and all those Doctor Who fans who, the Doctor Who fans I converse with are incredibly intelligent. I think we all are. But we're being spoken down to. This was a nothing story, a pointless story, and Paul, you really shouldn't have wasted your time or our time. Let me know what you think of this story. Comment down below. Like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back in the future for more Doctor Who videos. See you again soon.